Maplewood Estates was the kind of neighborhood that made you feel like you had finally made it. Nestled in the heart of suburban Ohio, the community boasted wide, tree-lined streets, immaculately manicured lawns, and houses that looked like they had been plucked straight out of a home design magazine. The Homeowners Association, HOA, was the backbone of this picturesque setting, ensuring that every home adhered to strict aesthetic standards. But beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect community, tensions simmered, and one woman held the reins of power with an iron fist. Her name was Maggie Thompson, though most residents referred to her as the Queen behind her back. Maggie was the HOA president, a position she had held for over a decade. She was known for her meticulous attention to detail and her unwavering commitment to the rules. But her dedication often crossed the line into obsession. Maggie patrolled the neighborhood daily, clipboard in hand, ready to pounce on any infraction: a misplaced trash can, a lawn that hadn't been mowed to her exact specifications, or a car parked slightly askew. For the most part, the residents of Maplewood Estates tolerated Maggie's overbearing behavior. They paid their dues on time, kept their lawns pristine, and avoided any activity that might draw her ire. But that all changed when a new resident moved in, someone who would challenge Maggie's authority in ways she never could have imagined. Daniel Carter was a quiet, unassuming man in his early 40s. He had recently relocated to Maplewood Estates after accepting a remote position with a major telecommunications company. To his neighbors, Daniel was just another tech enthusiast who spent most of his time tinkering with servers in his home office. What they didn't know was that Daniel wasn't just an employee, he was the majority stakeholder in a subsidiary of one of the largest telecom companies in the country. His company handled everything from cable TV and internet services to local broadcast licensing for the entire region. Daniel had chosen Maplewood Estates for its peaceful atmosphere and proximity to the city. He had no intention of causing waves or drawing attention to himself. But his arrival would soon disrupt the delicate balance of power in the neighborhood. The trouble began innocently enough. One afternoon, Daniel's co-worker parked a company van in front of his house while they worked on a project together. The van had a temporary permit displayed on the windshield, but it lacked the official HOA parking decal. Maggie, ever vigilant, spotted the violation immediately. She marched up to Daniel's door, clipboard in hand, and demanded an explanation. Daniel calmly explained that the van belonged to a VY siter and that the HOA's rules allowed for street parking for up to 48 hours. But Maggie wasn't VYing it. She slapped a violation notice on the van and threatened Daniel with fines if he didn't appear at the next HOA board meeting to explain himself. Daniel sighed and nodded, hoping to defuse the situation. He had no desire to escalate the conflict, but he could sense that this was just the beginning of a much larger battle. A few weeks later, Daniel's company began rolling out a major infrastructure upgrade in the area. The outdated cable lines that said Maplewood Estates were being replaced with state-of-the-art fiber optic cables, promising faster internet speeds and more reliable service. As part of the upgrade, a new junction box was installed on the side of Daniel's house. The box was sleek and modern, a far cry from the bulky, outdated models that dotted the neighborhood. But to Maggie, it was an eyesore, a blatant violation of the HOA's strict design standards. She wasted no time in issuing another violation notice, demanding that the box be removed immediately or face hefty fines. Daniel tried to reason with her. He explained that the upgrade was approved at the county level and would benefit the entire neighborhood. But Maggie was unmoved. "Rules are rules," she snapped, flipping through her stack of HOA bylaws. Frustrated but determined to resolve the issue peacefully, Daniel scheduled a meeting with the HOA board. He presented documentation proving the legality of the upgrade, but Maggie dismissed it outright. "Maplewood Estates has its own standards," she declared. "We don't care what the county says." The tension between Daniel and Maggie continued to escalate. Despite her threats, Daniel refused to remove the junction box. Over the following weeks, technicians completed the installation and Daniel's internet speeds soared. But then, one evening, he arrived home to find his internet, cable TV, and phone line all dead. After some troubleshooting, Daniel discovered the cause. The cables leading to the new junction box had been severed. The cuts were clean and precise, clearly the work of someone who knew what they were doing. Daniel's suspicions immediately turned to Maggie. Determined to catch her in the act, Daniel installed a discreet security camera near the junction box. A few nights later, the camera captured footage of a shadowy figure approaching the box. The infrared camera revealed Maggie, dressed in a hooded jacket, wielding a pair of wire cutters. She made quick work of the cables before disappearing into the night. Armed with the footage, Daniel confronted Maggie the next morning. She denied everything, but her eyes betrayed her guilt. Daniel called the police, who launched an investigation. However, without definitive proof such as a clear shot of Maggie's face, the case was far from airtight. In the meantime, Daniel had the cables repaired and installed a tamper-proof enclosure around the junction box. He also made sure that Maggie's own internet service was upgraded, a move that would come back to haunt her. The situation came to a head during a severe thunderstorm that caused an electrical surge in the neighborhood. Many residents, including Maggie, lost internet service. While most called the company's support line, Maggie took matters into her own hands. Armed with her trusty wire cutters, she marched to the community's main cable junction and began severing cables. Convine said that she was fixing the problem. But Maggie's actions had catastrophic consequences. The moment she cut the main trunk line, the entire neighborhood lost service. Furious residents emerged from their homes, only to find Maggie red-handed, surrounded by severed cables. The police were called, and Maggie was arrested on the spot. The fallout from Maggie's actions was swift and severe. The HOA board held an emergency meeting, and Maggie was forced to resign. Daniel, meanwhile, revealed his true role in the telecom company, a revelation that made headlines across the county. Maggie faced both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit from Daniel's company. The cost of repairing the damage ran into the tens of thousands of dollars, and Maggie was ordered to pay restitution. Her reputation in the neighborhood was irreparably damaged, and she became a pariah, rarely seen outside her home. With Maggie gone, the atmosphere in Maplewood Estates changed dramatically. The new HOA board, led by the fair-minded Deborah Harris, worked to foster a more collaborative and transparent community. Daniel became a respected figure in the neighborhood, hosting workshops on technology and helping residents navigate the digital age. The upgraded cable lines became a selling point for Maplewood Estates, and the neighborhood thrived. Children played freely in their driveways, neighbors chatted over fences, and the once oppressive HOA culture was replaced with a spirit of cooperation and mutual respect. In the end, Maggie's downfall served as a cautionary tale for the residents of Maplewood Estates. Her petty tyranny and ignorance had led to her own undoing, and her actions had exposed the dangers of unchecked authority. The neighborhood emerged stronger and more united, a testament to the power of community and the importance of standing up to those who abuse their power. As for Daniel, he continued to focus on his work, using his position to bridge the digital divide and bring connectivity to underserved areas. The cable war had taught him valuable lessons about the importance of patience, strategy, and the power of letting others dig their own graves. And so, Maplewood Estates became a shining example of what can happen when neighbors come together to challenge the misuse of authority. The streamlined cable boxes, now safely enclosed in tamper-proof casings, stood as silent monuments to the day Maggie Thompson learned the hard way that cutting corners in cables can lead to serious consequences. In the weeks following Maggie's arrest, Maplewood Estates underwent a transformation. The once tense atmosphere gave way to a sense of camaraderie and mutual respect. Neighbors who had previously only exchanged polite nods now gathered for block parties and community events. The new HOA board, led by Deborah Harris and her VYC president, George Whitaker, made a concerted effort to involve residents in decision-making processes. Monthly meetings became open forums where everyone had a voice, and the days of arbitrary fines and petty power struggles seemed like a distant memory. Daniel Carter, now a local hero of sorts, found himself in an unexpected position of influence. His revelation as the majority stakeholder in the telecom company had not only shocked the neighborhood, but also earned him a newfound respect. People who had once viewed him as just the tech guy now sought his advice on everything from home networking to streaming Ser VYCS. Daniel, ever the humble professional, embraced his role as a community leader, hosting workshops and offering guidance to anyone who asked. But while the neighborhood flourished, Maggie Thompson's life spiraled further into disarray. The legal consequences of her actions were severe. She was found guilty of vandalism and destruction of property, and though she avoided jail time, she was placed on probation and ordered to complete 200 hours of community Ser VYC. The CIVYL lawsuit filed by Daniel's company resulted in a hefty financial judgment against her, forcing her to dip into her retirement SAVYNGS to cover the costs. Maggie's once imposing presence in the neighborhood was reduced to a shadow. She rarely left her house, and when she did, it was with her head down, avoiding eye contact with her neighbors. The woman who had once ruled Maplewood Estates with an iron fist was now a pariah, her reputation in tatters. Despite her legal and financial troubles, Maggie wasn't ready to admit defeat. In a desperate attempt to salvage her reputation, she took to social media, crafting a lengthy post that painted herself as the victim of a corporate conspiracy. She claimed that she had been acting in the best interests of the neighborhood and that Daniel had used his position to bully her into submission. She even suggested that the entire incident had been staged to discredit her. The post quickly gained traction, but not in the way Maggie had hoped. While a handful of her old friends rallied to her defense, the vast majority of the comments came from her neighbors, who were quick to set the record straight. Dozens of residents shared their own stories of Maggie's overbearing behavior, from her threats to uproot an elderly neighbor's petunias to her insistence that a single mother remove a wooden playset from her yard. The backlash was swift and brutal. Maggie's post was flooded with comments calling her out for her hypocrisy and lies. Even people outside the neighborhood, who had no context for the situation, joined in, criticizing her for her reckless actions. Within days, Maggie was forced to take down the post, but the damage had already been done. Her attempt to rewrite the narrative had only further cemented her status as the VY Lane of Maplewood Estates. Just as the neighborhood was settling into its newfound harmony, a new challenge emerged. A series of mysterious outages began plaguing the upgraded cable system. At first, the disruptions were minor, a few minutes of lost Ser VYC here and there, but they soon grew more frequent and severe. Entire blocks would lose internet and cable Ser VYC for hours at a time, leaving residents frustrated and confused. Daniel, who had been monitoring the system closely, suspected foul play. The outages were too targeted and too consistent to be mere coincidences. He enlisted the help of his lead technician, Bernie, to investigate. Together, they discovered that someone had been tampering with the main trunk line, the same line Maggie had severed months earlier. The culprit, however, wasn't Maggie. Security footage revealed a different figure, a tall, hooded indie VY duel who moved with precision and purpose. The person seemed to know exactly where to cut the cables to cause maximum disruption without being detected. Daniel and Bernie worked tirelessly to repair the damage and install additional security measures, but the outages continued. The mystery deepened when Daniel received an anonymous email. The sender claimed to have information about the outages but demanded a meeting in person. Reluctantly, Daniel agreed, arranging to meet the informant at a nearby park after dark. When the informant arrived, Daniel was shocked to see a familiar face, George Whitaker, the HOA's VYC president. George looked nervous, glancing over his shoulder as he approached. "I didn't know who else to turn to," he said in a hushed tone. "I think I know who's behind the outages." According to George, the saboteur was none other than Marguerite Simmons, Maggie's closest ally on the HOA board. Marguerite had been furious about Maggie's downfall and had vowed to avenge her friend. She had been using her knowledge of the neighborhood's infrastructure to target the cable system, hoping to undermine Daniel and the new HOA leadership. Daniel was stunned. He had always known Marguerite to be a troublemaker, but he never imagined she would go this far. With George's help, he set a plan to catch Marguerite in the act. The next time an outage occurred, Daniel and Bernie were ready. They had installed hidden cameras near the main trunk line and positioned themselves nearby, waiting for the saboteur to strike. Sure enough, within minutes, Marguerite appeared, dressed in dark clothing and carrying a pair of wire cutters. As she approached the cables, Daniel and Bernie sprang into action. They confronted Marguerite, catching her red-handed. She tried to flee, but George, who had been waiting nearby, blocked her path. The police were called, and Marguerite was arrested on the spot. The evidence against her was overwhelming. Security footage, combined with George's testimony, left no doubt about her guilt. Marguerite was charged with vandalism and faced the same legal consequences as Maggie. Her arrest marked the end of the sabotage and brought a sense of closure to the neighborhood. With both Maggie and Marguerite out of the picture, Maplewood Estates entered a new era of peace and prosperity. The HOA, now led by Deborah and George, continued to prioritize transparency and collaboration. Residents felt more empowered than ever, knowing that their voices mattered and that the days of petty tyranny were over. Daniel, meanwhile, turned his attention to a new project, expanding fiber-optic internet access to rural areas. Inspired by the events in Maplewood Estates, he saw an opportunity to use his position to bridge the digital divide and bring connectivity to underserved communities. The project became his passion, and he poured his heart and soul into making it a reality. As for Maggie and Marguerite, their fates were sealed. Maggie, unable to bear the shame and financial strain, eventually put her house up for sale and moved away. Marguerite, facing mounting legal fees and community backlash, followed suit. The two women, once the self-appointed rulers of Maplewood Estates, became little more than cautionary tales. Years later, as Daniel walked through the neighborhood on a crisp autumn morning, he couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. The streets were alive with the sounds of children playing, neighbors chatting, and the hum of modern technology. The streamlined cable boxes, now a permanent fixture in every yard, stood as silent reminders of the battle that had reshaped their community. Daniel had never intended to become a hero or a leader, but life had a way of thrusting people into roles they never expected. The lessons he had learned about patience, strategy, and the power of community had stayed with him, guiding him in both his personal and professional life. As he passed by the park, he saw a group of kids playing basketball, their laughter echoing through the air. It was a small but powerful symbol of the freedom and unity that now defined Maplewood Estates. The neighborhood had weathered its share of storms, but it had emerged stronger and more resilient than ever. And so, the story of Maplewood Estates became a testament to the power of standing up to injustice, the importance of community, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. It was a story that would be told for generations, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, hope and unity could prevail. If you were the one in this story, how would you react? Would you stand up and fight back, or accept the unreasonable pressure and control from the HOA? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video with more people. Your small action gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more intense and engaging stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.